Thank you for being with us. Dick Darnell here, and we're going to have a 15-20 minute conversation with James Rink, extraordinary videographer, Super Soldier Talks, production artist, and James O, we will say, it's an eclectic name, who is a friend of Al Bailic's and a working associate of times past. And Al Bailick was, of course, one of the two brothers of the Philadelphia experiment, as well as a principal administrator to the Montauk facility at the end of Long Island. So we're going to talk a little bit about Al, who passed away in, I think, 2015 in May in Mexico, where his niece took him on because Al was stripped of his pensions and stuff like that. He had a hard way to go in his last days financially, but he meandered along, and he had a few friends like myself that helped him along the best we could with our abilities. And Al did do several YouTube presentations that you could pull up. Al Bailick, Bialek, on YouTube. But in spirit of that, we're talking with, well, we got Jimmy and James here.
Jimmy Paine.
Say again.
Jimmy Paine.
Pine.
Paine. Jimmy Paine.
Okay, you're the one that said it. I had a dentist named Payne once, but that's another story. In La Costa, California. So let me ask you, Jimmy, the papers, a lot of what was left of Al Bailic's papers went with him down to Mexico, and apparently his niece has them in Mexico, probably in a garage or something. Do you think that the
Dick, I'm going to pause you.
Yeah.
But hello, everybody. I'm James Rank. By the way, can you explain to the audience who Al Bailick is for people who have who clicked on this and have no idea what this is about?
Al Bailick is one of the two Philadelphia experiment brothers. He and his brother, actually there was a third brother too, Alexander. They were on the ship, the Eldridge, in the Philadelphia Bay with Tesla and Einstein, I think. I'm not sure about that. And a couple others. Jimmy, you might have to tell me who some of the others were that were on the Oppenheimer. That's right. Oh, by the way, the sole surviving members of the Manhattan Project meet once a year in the first week of September, the surviving members in Highlands, North Carolina. I won't say where, but it's in town, and they still meet once a year for whoever's left of the Manhattan Project. But some of those members were also there on the on the port, looking at the Eldridge to see if the experiment of disappearance would take place with the equipment that was on the Eldridge, as well as what was on the port side, on the land side. And as we know with the Philadelphia experiment, it went well in one sense, but in the other sense, when they brought it back, the reconstruction molecularly did not go right. And some of the members of some of the sailors were embedded into the metal, dying of the ship as it was reforming from invisibility. And Alexander, the third brother, he just didn't make it. Duncan and Al, they jumped off the ship, and they went into a time. How would you say, Jimmy? Was it a time warp or a time worm or what? What a void before they. Go ahead.
When they jumped off the ship, they fell through time. Now, those two had already jumped off before me. When I first became aware of the ship, I was sent over. This is in 1962. All right, I was like 7 years old, and I went over to Russia. Lee Harvey Oswald had spotted a flying saucer over in Russia. Now, the flying saucer that was over in Russia was the same make and model of the flying saucer that crashed in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. When I went over to Russia, I got into the spacecraft and I flew it out of Russia and I landed it on the deck of the Eldridge. Now, this spacecraft was only like about 3 feet tall and maybe about 16 foot in diameter. So it had just enough space that you could land it on the front deck of the Eldridge. Now, that was the first time that I had been on the Eldridge, and the Eldridge was not damaged at that point. And after I landed on the deck of the Eldridge, Lieutenant Alexander Cameron brought me to the side, and he told me to just jump off of the ship into there was it was pitch black below the ship, and I thought it was going to be water, but it wasn't water. And when I jumped off the ship, I fell down into the yard of Camp Hero inside the electrified fence. Now, that is the first time that I ever knew about the Eldridge. That is the very first time.
How old were you?
I was 7 years old. Now, what happened is when the spacecraft that crashed in Roswell, New Mexico, the little grays that were on that spacecraft, and there was also some tall grays. They're very thin. Okay. The Air Force has a requirement on height and weight for its Air Force pilots. And since I was a child, I was so small, I could get into the craft. A full-size pilot could not get into this flying saucer, but I could. So I was actually trained to fly these spacecraft. Now, the spacecraft that crashed in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947 is damaged beyond repair, but it's used as a flight simulator. So I trained on the Roswell crash for about a year or two before I did the mission over in Russia. But that's how.
How were you got into all this at 7 years old? Were you a protege of genius or something?
No, I had an encounter when I was about 3.5, 4 years old, and I had gotten around a rose bush and I got scratched playing with Mo. Now, Mo is an Ewok, and the Air Force came to my town and they captured Mo and brought him back to Area 51. And one of the men in black saw I had a scratch on my arm, and he said, "How did you get that, son?" And I said, "Well, I scratched on a thorn next to a rose bush." He said, "Well, did Mo scratch you?" And I said, "No." And they later came back that night around about 10:30, 11 o'clock, bust in our door, and they went in there and picked me out of my bed, and they put me on an Air Force plane and flew me to Nellis Air Force Base. And because I came in contact with extraterrestrial, they didn't know what kind of diseases that they carry. So I had to go to Area 51 and be quarantined for about 6 days. And at the end of the 6th day, the little scratch started to heal. and but they was concerned that I might, have something like Ebola or leprosy or something. So, um, but while I was there, I met the tall white warriors, and I got to knowing them. And basically, since I was so young, I had no fear of aliens. If it was an adult, they would panic. But I was so young, I didn't know the difference. I mean, I just thought they were special beings. But that's how I got involved with the secret space program.
I see. Al, so Al came back with Duncan in 62, and then he was sent back to shut down. Well, Al told me once with the movie Philadelphia Experiment, we sat and watched it once, and he said really about the first 7 minutes was accurate, and after that it was a movie, which is fine, but that's what it is. So I ask you, um, were you close to him? We're going to talk about you on a next video, only so much per video time wise. With Aldo, when he came back, were you is that where you first really encountered Al, even though you were a child? And put together for us, please.
Um,
You came back from Russia and you're on the spaceship on the bow of the Eldridge. Why were you there? That's because all the mechanism of time travel was up and running. That's right. So you sucked to there.
yeah, I didn't realize it had time traveling capabilities. Okay.
Yes.
But what happened, um, I want to go back to Oscar Snyder, Captain Oscar Snyder. Now, Captain Oscar Snyder, um, he was a German U-boat captain who was caught around 42 or 1943. I don't exactly remember the year. And he was caught by the French off the coast of France, and he was turned over to U.S. authorities, and he was repatriated into the United States Navy as a Navy medic. And he was he had a very high IQ, and Captain Oscar Snyder, got to working on the Project Blue Sky, which is basically Project Rainbow, which as Project Rainbow, which is basically the Eldritch. So he was one of the officers who worked um, with the crew of the Eldritch. Now, at Camp Hero in New York, every once in a while, somebody would spot a U-boat coming around by the sound there, and that was basically the U-boat. I would get on it they would drop me off during the night, and I would enter the Montauk and go back and forth from That's how I got to knowing Al, was at Montauk. I was one of the Montauk boys.
Well, though you were only 7 years old or so at the time, right?
No, I first got introduced to it when I was 7. And then I went through from the time I was 7 up to the time it was closed. The Montauk Bay closed.
I see. I see. Did you know Duncan as well?
Yes.
And were you there for when he went crazy and manifested the gorilla that ate
What
the concrete block and everything?
what happened on that? When I was young, maybe I want to say not long after I got there, since I was so young, they just introduced me to what was going on at Montauk. And then I would go back to Nellis Air Force Base, and this went on for many years, back and forth between Nellis. I would go from Nellis to Holloman Air Force Base uh, to Camp Hero and back. As far as the creature you described, the Bigfoot, uh, I had went one. I had went out in the American Northwest with one of the Men in Black as a young child, and they had trapped and killed a Bigfoot. Okay, and they were just showing me the Bigfoot they had tracked down and killed. I and they brought me back to Camp Hero, and they put a band over my head. You could think of something like a can of beer or whatever, and it would appear. And I just happened to think about the Bigfoot, and a Bigfoot appeared, and when it did, it knocked over one of the computers inside the Montauk building. And all the guys, this is about at 10 o'clock at night, all the guys panicked and they ran out. And I ran out with him. And when I did, the door locked behind us. And when it knocked over the machine, a switch got stuck. So what happened then, Preston Nichols had to get a torch, and I had to get the tank. I was probably about 9 years old at this point. We had to, Preston had to climb up a ladder on the outside of the tower, the radio tower, and get up into the top room. And I held a flashlight, and anyway, he lit the torch and he cut the power cable of the antenna cable, and it killed the feed. And that's when the Bigfoot dematerialized. Now that's when the first account of the Bigfoot. So it actually was my thought. But what had happened, I think Duncan saw an opportunity here with the Bigfoot, and he apparently was able to make it materialize again, and that's when it went into the base several days later and pounded a building down.
Well, that's new information. That a Bigfoot, it wasn't necessarily a gorilla circumstance. It was a Bigfoot that went nuts.
It's a Bigfoot, but if you there's a picture of it. Al Bielek had a picture of it, and he showed it. He gave a presentation, and he actually showed the Bigfoot on his presentation.
The presentation on the base there, or on YouTube with one of his narrations? Where's that?
From what I understood of it,
because he's done several presentations on YouTube.
All right, but let me say this. It was towards the last time that he was with Preston Nichols. Al Bielek and Preston Nichols got together with Duncan, and they had a film crew from, I think they were from Japan, if I wasn't mistaken. And he filmed it.
They went into where the machine was and where the chair. And
yeah.
It was all emptied out except for a few scrap pieces of blown out cabinetry and trash.
Yeah, Duncan started crying in the tape, and then they they had brought a psychic in, and she was trying to pick up what what was going on inside that building. But they went into bunker 112. Now I've been into bunker 112, and that's where it was filmed at, inside bunker 112. That's where the Montauk boys would, if the initiation, if you were a Montauk boy, that was the first place that you spent the night, was in bunker 112. I've been in there, and it's a hell. You can't breathe, and and the whole place smells of gun oil, and gunpowder.
Interesting. Where in Camp Hero that is, I'm not for sure. Is that close to the building where the big dish is, the big
Yes,
oval?
yes.
Okay, I think I know where it is then, because that
Well,
was a couple years ago. I stayed at Duncan's house, and the next day I thought, well, I had a car rental, and I said, well, do you want to go with me? He said, no, I got stuff to do. He had to feed his cat. So I drove out there on my own and did some video, what have you. And so I'm understanding what you're saying. Um, we're wonderfully sidetracking here, and that's new information about the Bigfoot factor, because it's true they are able to manifest and unmanifest per se. Not to sidetrack too much, a friend of mine that passed last year, Will Lossy of the Cherokee Nation, he was one of the principal medicine men, very personal friend, gave me an eagle feather, and I've got permission written down to have it, which makes it legal. But he had a photograph, which it went somewhere, and it showed a Bigfoot. It was actually shot by a Dr. Aldrich that paid him, that hired him for $10,000, of which he robbed him out of it. He never paid him. The doctor lives in Whittier, North Carolina. But it's a photo of a Bigfoot standing before them, which is up behind Will's house. I think it was behind Will's house, or maybe it was over on Rattlesnake Mountain, one or the other. But next to the Bigfoot is another Bigfoot crouched down half so, that's half manifest and half of disappearance. And to the other side is a third Bigfoot that is like crouched way down, and it's only like 25% manifest, which says a lot about a lot of things as far as manifest or not next to each other. And here's a full manifest, and there's a lot of physics here taking place. So with what you're giving reference to, in regards to this point of the Bigfoot that you experienced with that Men in Black, was that Men in Black, were they afraid, because they can do crazy stuff too? Were they of a character of association with the Bigfoot, and or a character of association with the knowledge and physics of disappearance or not? And or I understand the Bigfoot felt that there's one narration from 1946 where a given Bigfoot said that they originally were from another planet, and they were prisoners, and their spaceship crashed, and they all were able to break loose. The given stormtroopers that were deputies, whatever, that were managing them, were killed in the crash, and some were able to get away. Do you have some understanding of that aspect of the Bigfoot aspect with your experience with them and with the Men in Black factor? And or what would you also say in regards to Al Balick and his character of association or knowance of the Bigfoot and or now Men in Black factor? By the way, my buddy David Webb and I, we whacked about 300 Men in Black about 15 years ago, but so they're not around too much anymore. Not too many of them anyway. But that's another story.
That's Division 6 ACIO, Pine Gap.
Say again.
Men in Black is Division 6 ACIO in Pine Gap, and also Area 51.
Oh, is that okay? That's all. So Pine Gap, Australia, and Area 51. I guess that's about the only place that they run now?
Well, the Pine Gap is a joint base between the United States and Great Britain. Most of the British aerospace companies have to have a place to fire their missiles off, and Britain, is just too crowded. I mean, plus you have ships
It's a
out
little
in
island.
you have ships out in the ocean there, so they prefer to go. The British aerospace companies, they prefer the Pine Gap um, facility. But getting back to the Bigfoot issue, um, how I'm associated with the Bigfoot is that if I have a reptilian that's giving me a hard time, I can get a Bigfoot and it would beat the hell out of a reptilian.
Cool.
Yeah. If I had a reptilian giving me a hard time, only thing I got to do is get a Bigfoot to beat the hell out of a reptilian. So that's the reason why reptilians never gave me any problems, because I knew to play one off against the other. But the Bigfoots were bred for they're basically before humans did any mining. When reptilians came to Earth, the reptilians did the mining, and they didn't want to do the mining, so they tried the Bigfoots to do the mining. And the Bigfoots, I'm not sure what happened. Maybe they broke loose. I don't know that far back what happened. Um, but um, but the Bigfoots, they're intelligent. They're very
Yes.
intelligent.
Yes.
And I had one that used to guard me, help me out, and they stink like a devil.
Oh, I know. I know where one lives in Rooseville, Georgia.
Yeah.
Horrible.
But I've been out in
Acceptable.
the woods, getting a stick, beating a tree, Um, but the one that was killed was a rogue one. It wasn't a friendly one, from what I understood. But what happened?
What percent would you say of the Bigfoots are cool and capable of being cool? Because most of them are really not cool and really dangerous. What percent would you say are okay?
I never had one uh, that went after me. Now the getting back to how they move around is this: like the Casper Caverns in New Mexico have never been fully mapped, and these caverns run all over the United States. You can see a Bigfoot in New Mexico, then it'll pop up in Colorado. So these tunnels run all over the United States.
So what, they run through the tunnels or something? What do you mean?
Yeah, there's underground caverns,
Well, no,
and
they have an attitude.
so the caverns in New Mexico, the Casper caverns, I mean, they extend out at least to Colorado, and then there's all kind of tunnels going north, up into Oregon, uh, all up in there. So they pop up from time to time. um, but getting back to the Men in Black, the Men in Black are not bad people. I was one of them when I was 17 years old. Now, their primary mission is Area 51 security. If you have an alien that gets loose, they're going to go out and round it up. Okay. So I don't know about your friend whacking some, but there's not that many men in black. There's probably less than 2-3 dozen of them total. I don't know about 300, but then see they are from they're from the Central Intelligence Group. Now, Central Intelligence Group only lasted 2 years, and then when they Congress dissolved them and created the CIA. So I fell under.
It was a transition from OSS to that, and then CIA. There was a period there.
No, what happened? What happened was during World War II.
Yeah.
The Army, Navy, and Coast Guard. They didn't have an Air Force. They had an Army Air Force. All of those agencies, those government agencies had their own intelligence. You had Army intelligence, Navy intelligence, Coast Guard intelligence, and their budgets were classified. All right, when the war was coming to an end, Roosevelt knew the war would be over very soon. So he's the one that walked into the room to a Navy admiral, and he had a black overcoat and some sunglasses and a dagger. And he said, he handed that, he said, I want to take the men that are in each agency, and I want to take them out of uniform and put them in this black suit. And so when it first started off, the Central Intelligence Group answered to the Navy. Well, the Army got upset because, hey, the Navy was needing more men in black than the Army, because the Navy was all over the world. And then you had the Army Air Force complaining, that they weren't getting as much as the Army was. So Congress,
the Navy was.
Yeah, they wasn't. The budgets were black budgets, and they were suspicious of each other. The Army was suspicious of the Navy, and Navy was suspicious of the Coast Guard.
It's amazing.
It was all black budgeted. So Congress stepped in and said, we're going to stop all this infighting. We're just going to take the Central Intelligence Group. We're going to take it away from Joint Chiefs of Staff, and we're going to create the Central Intelligence Agency. And the Central Intelligence Agency will answer to the National Security Administration. So CIA and NSA was created in 1947.
National Security Council.
Yeah. National Security Administration, excuse me.
Mm-hmm. It's okay to be fuzzy. We're both there. Now you're saying a friend of mine, Ed Linder, his father was the interpreter between the Nazis and the few military folks in the building just diagonal from the University Club in New York. And that's where the CIA was formed. But the members, the American members, I'm not for sure who they were offhand. It's known, but talking to a couple Germans that, where they formed the CIA, and essentially it was a closed up building, but they had one room where they had a light bulb in the center of it, and they did this meeting. It's kind of cool. You know how those generals of World War II, their thing was to have the pearl handle or whatever Colt 45s and the holsters and stuff like that. Well, Ed used to have dinner with General McCarthy, who was living in the University Club by himself, and he'd go up there and have dinner with them, you know. And he was only 17 years old, and here's the general and everything. So anyway, the general McCarthy gave him his two pistols and the holster and the whole thing, and I've worn them. I've worn them. So that's cool, you know. All the generals they had there, that was their thing, the Colt 45 holster thing. Um, I want to swing back to keep somewhat on page in regards to Al. We'll do another video here in a bit. So we should end point maybe for the video with Al Balick being in this position of circumstance you experienced, which I'm highly respecting here, of new information in regards to the Area 51. And this is and the Oregon factor, I guess. That's where you did the Bigfoot experience. What you said it was up there?
It was in the Northwest when they killed it, but apparently it came out of one of the underground caverns when it was killed. But see, when I saw it, it was already deceased. And then when I got to Montauk and they put, you know, you got to remember I'm only 7 years old at the time, between 7 and 8 years old. And when they put the band on my head, whatever you think is what appears. And subconsciously, because it was still fresh in my mind, that's just what appeared. And it frightened everybody in the room. They're looking up and seeing an 8 foot tall Bigfoot tearing the room up. It frightened them. See, they didn't know a little kid would. They didn't know anything that had saw anything like that. You know, they thought, well, look, you just make a can of beer appear here. You know, the captain, he always liked a can of beer, Ajax beer. And you could make the can of beer appear, and that was a pleasant thought for him. But an 8 foot tall, 9 foot tall Bigfoot, well, that, you know, scared the hell out of him. You know,
you say it was an Ajax beer?
I think it was Ajax beer.
That's a Yankee Hams beer.
Well, it was. I mean, I remember it was a beer that he always liked. Because when I kind of when I got to fooling with the Montauk boys was, you know, a few years later when I got a little older, like about 12, 13 years old. When I got that old, hey, it's time for you to go to Montauk. And I did a lot of time jumps at Montauk with the Montauk boys, quite a few.
Okay, let's end this session right here, and we'll do another.
Why don't you explain how you knew Al?
Well, how I knew Al, okay, I'll a short thing on that, and then let's do another one here in a moment. I knew Al through Robin Quayle in Atlanta, where I lived for 30 years, and I was a respected at the time, respected psychic amongst the psychic crowd. It's a very, very healthy, good crowd in those 70s and 80s and 90s. And I met several through. Robin would bring these different sorts, like Al or Billy Cooper, or some others. I can't even think of them that I've known to come and do presentations, big events where a couple hundred people would come, and she used to do that herself. She was a past life regressionist, respected in the United States, of the top three of such, and she was just a great networker. She was highly loved. She passed away last year at 85, and she looked real good. She really retained her beauty all the way to the end. She was a very beautiful gal. And and Robin was great. So I met Al through her. I met her Duncan actually through Tricia McCannon, who was an old girlfriend of Duncan's for a while. And Tricia's a great encyclopedia of spiritual matters and UFOlogy and such. Lives in Atlanta. So I knew Al, and Al and I just hit it off as pals. And I remember, that's right. I was 1980. That's how far back we go. And I was working with the Atlanta child murders, and me with two other people. We solved the child murders. Working with Captain Green, Cobb County. We told him to go out to the bridge of Chattahoochee, this one bridge, on a certain night. And he actually posted 4 bridges, and we were off one bridge, but we were right. And they caught Wayne Williams, who was only part of the whole picture. That's a whole nother subject, the child murder subject. There was a lot of people involved. But Al and I hit it off. He was living in Smyrna in a small apartment and just having a quiet, retired time. And he would come to this gentleman's house, Sam Matthews, who had the oldest spiritual group, what have you, in Atlanta for several decades. Just a little more so than what was called the Foundation of Truth, which was a large operation for many years in Atlanta. Very nice, very healthy, until it just ended, okay, after about 35 years almost. And that's where Eileen Cowley, the Cowleys of Finn Horn, and many people came. What's her name? Claw? Many people. Anyway, so Al and I, we palled around. He's been to my house in Atlanta before I moved to the mountains, and he's been to my house in the mountains, where he helped me on an investigation in the mountains there. On one visit up, we had a abduction. This would be in 2001. Down the road from me, we had an abduction of a family, the Duncan family, and all were taken, including the dog, except for a teenage boy that they had. He got away, and he was found wandering around nuts, and they just had to pack him away because it took him out. But they left a like a sacred circle imprint, but oval shape, on a little knoll by where they abducted him. So I took Al out there where this burn mark was, like to see if he could figure out, well, who's the alien crowd that did this abduction of a whole family. It was a hillbilly family too. Like, why? And he couldn't figure it out. That was one thing he couldn't figure out. He was stumped. So anyway, after Al on that particular visit went back home, I personally got samples of the grass of the burn mark, some of the inside, some of the outside, and gave them to my friend who was of NSA at the time to have them. I said, here's the stuff. Go do what you want with it. Examine it and look at their molecular structure, whatever you want to do. I didn't care. So all that took place, but that's one time Al couldn't figure out who the group was that did that abduction or why. But it's true, after that took place, here comes the white coats and the Suburbans and all that stuff to investigate the site there at Pine Creek and Colway Mountain Road. And that one just never got figured out. It's just didn't get figured out. But Al and I, we had a lot of good times. And intellectually, my friend David Webb, who passed, he was an Indian researcher in Medi. He and Al really jived. But anyway, that's some of my knowing of Al for many years, really. Probably 15, 20 years, really. Yeah, would be. Yeah. So, but then he was poor and he wound up having to go to Mexico, for his final days. But he would tell me about at Montauk. Let's end this segment and we'll do another one. Kill it.